with Ian McCullen playing Macbeth, Dame Judith Dench playing Lady Macbeth. And it provided the users with an incredible variety of things that they could do in the environment that they established in the CD-ROM. They could, of course, read the play. The text, would move across the screen in front of them. They could just listen. They could read and listen simultaneously. The pages turned automatically. You could click on the text at any point to move the playhead to that particular point in the play. There were notes, about 1,500 of them, explanatory essays, 25,000 words or more of them, video clips of other performances from Kurosawa's version, from Roman Polanski, from Orson Welles. And you could compare them. There were maps, there were charts, there were images, just about everything anyone could want. It was an extremely rich environment. Users could make their own notes, and they could automatically transfer them to their word processor if they wanted to. And then they had this wonderful feature, which I loved. It's called the karaoke Macbeth, where you could pick a particular scene and see it performed by the Royal Shakespeare Company, or actually hear it, and then you could drop out one voice and play that voice yourself. And, it was a beautiful thing. And I should say that based on this idea, Larry did this with video work. Larry was at Stanford. This was for the occasion of the opening of the restored Globe Theatre in London. And in the way he did it, you could actually fill in for one of the characters, and it would be videotaped and you'd be plugged right in there in the film. Okay, now what all of this work that we're seeing, or almost all of it, has in common is that they were constructed by HyperCard, which is a hypermedia authoring tool. I'm sure many of you remember it, and many of you have been left in the wake of HyperCard projects that have been sort of discarded after it. HyperCard was released in 1987. It was free, came installed on a new Macintosh. You could just download it. It was easy to use. I took the metaphor of a stack of cards, and you could move to any one of those cards in that stack just instantaneously. And it contained an English-like scripting language called HyperTalk. It was immediately easy to work with and to understand. And it also provided graphic tools like a version of McPaint. I should say here that the author of HyperCard was Bill Atkinson, who also created McPaint. And it was built right in there. There were editable searches, searchable text fields, editable fields and searchable text fields. Scriptable buttons were created, and just like graphics, you just take your cursor and draw a space where you wanted them, and they popped up there. They even included audio capabilities. You could compose music in HyperCard. And what happened effectively was that HyperCard delivered significant computing power to creative people who had few preconceptions of what it was or what it should be used for, and as lacking those preconceptions, they used it for just about everything. Artists, writers, non-programmers, they all dived in, and all of this happened on a tiny little 9-inch screen. I should add as an aside that it could be extended too, so that there were external commands or external functions that could be written in any normal lower level computing language, say like C, and then add it in. When it, at the time of its demise, HyperCard had a huge coterie of users, and very much attached to it. This is the International HyperCard Users Group, and you can see this was written basically 6 years after Apple had stopped upgrading HyperCard, and yet there were all these dedicated users who were was looking for and waiting for its resurgence. Now, here I managed to pull out an old computer and get HyperCard up and running, and I did a little thing here. It's basically what you have are two fields. There's one called top, one called bottom, text fields, and a button. Now we started and it says hello world, and on the bottom one, and by clicking on the button you could take one line, I chose the second one, cool, and drop that word into the bottom field. The code on that reads, as you can see, put line 2 of card field top after the first word of card field bottom. Pretty simple. One line of code, it's English. Okay? I then set out to do this using ActionScript 3 and Flash as it is nowadays. And so we start again with the top and bottom fields. We click the button and we get hello cool world. And here's an image of the code that goes into it. You can see what originally was just one line of code is now 15 lines of code, and that there's some fairly complex stuff in there. You have to import in order to use them 2 classes so that you can use the text field in the mouse events, and that all the variables are strict typed, so that you can see there's string variables and number variables, but that all has to be designated. And most of all, it doesn't look anything like English anymore. Okay. HyperCard, once gone, engendered a whole bunch of children, and you can see what they are here. They had a long and interesting history. Some of them, Director Flash, still exists to this day. Some of them, Metropolis, disappeared very, very quickly. There was SuperCard, I think that was the first one. It was really HyperCard on steroids. It had full use of color. It was much wider projects in scope. It had multiple windows. It ran on the web, although with a plugin that was required, so that effectively it became a bit of a deterrent to using it on the web. Then there was Director. Director didn't even start as a programming language or have a programming language to begin with, but after HyperCard it developed one rather quickly, and it went through a lot of changes. That whole path from top-down programming to object-oriented programming is reflected in there, and there's a huge amount of legacy code. There's Flash, and Flash was the first one of its sort that was really started with the web in mind, and also can create standalone applications. It has a long and interesting history, and is pretty much, for authoring tools, pretty much still the standard. And then finally, one of my favorite is Metropolis. Metropolis was really a brilliant authoring environment, and it didn't use any of those metaphors that stood behind HyperCard, the stack of cards, or Director and Flash, which was thought of as a sequence of images that created a video. So there was no frame-by-frame thinking. It really resembled the shape of the project that you yourself was creating. I created a CD-ROM with El Teatro Campesino from the fields to Hollywood, and we used Metropolis. And then no sooner than I create this field, this disk, then Metropolis was purchased by Quark, and Quark pillaged it for some of the technology and then took it off the market. So this really brings me to my final pitch here, which has to do with preservation. The product, the El Teatro CD-ROM, is still works on Windows, doesn't work on a Mac anymore, at least if you've upgraded your operating system. And El Teatro Campesino has come to me and asked me if I wouldn't now do a new version of it. They're ready to put it on the web this time. When we started, they felt there was too much of a sort of technological culture gap, and that Chicano families didn't have access to broadband web. But they're ready for it now. But I think this really indicates some of the preservation issues that we have to deal with. We witnessed as the benefit of this first tidal wave from 84 to 85, to 95, an outpouring of really brilliant projects that explored new ways for students to interact with the material that they were dealing with. And now the creative place is ceded to the web. So with the end of classic mode, then we have all of these issues that are, we have to deal with to bring it over. In particular, well, as you can see, some of these things are going to have to, we've lost the original code. If they were to be preserved, they would have to be recreated without the original code. There's also the possibility, still there's a company called TileStack, amongst others, that are working at creating a HyperCard emulator so that it can take all of the old projects and run them on the web nowadays. There's the issue of the legacy computers. We need it just to run these things. And more importantly, many of the programmers are disappearing. They're getting old. And if we don't consult them now and find out what their secrets were, the time will come pretty soon when they're no longer available. So in conclusion, I'll skip this, what we've got really in the threshold years, not one group, but two groups, and it folds right in half. The first part is going digital, and it tended to result in projects up on floppy disks first with the academic courseware exchange, and then on CDs, CD-ROMs with Voyager and other companies, and that represents the first half. And then the second half has to do with connectivity, and there's the big movement to the web. So. Bill Atkinson somewhat lamented that he had missed the point. He said that there was a huge paradigm shift and I didn't get it at the time, that I thought of computing as a box-centered enterprise. Academic computing, I think, was also. I thought of it as a box-centered enterprise, and indeed it turned out that it shifted to the web and it became part of a huge worldwide intelligence, all connected. And he felt that he'd really missed the mark. The irony of the whole thing is that Mark Andreessen, when he talked about the establishment of the web, which is to say the establishment of Mosaic, he said that his first inspiration was HyperCard. And in the end, when you look at it, HyperCard with its metaphor of stack of cards, and the web using instant access to pages, web pages, very much the same metaphor. And the two of them were only about an inch apart. Okay.
So we hope we challenge you with thinking about, as you rush toward the future, all of the different transitions and changes that are occurring, all the things that become legacy. The metaphor of the Nikon mount is very relevant here. How can we continue on, and how can we transpose really great content, digital content from analog content, into the future? It's something we all need to be thinking about as we're creating products and working with faculty and developing content. There are huge challenges ahead for us. I think we've burned through the time. We presented a tremendous amount of content, but I'm getting go ahead and take question signs from my hook back there, the hooks, the dual hooks, JP and Israel. So we have some comments, and guess who might have that comment except Bob Romanelli? Here he is. Bob?
I'll make this fast, but I hope in doing all this, and I totally agree with what you said about this new kind of pedagogy. And you talked about, well, you have the option in Macbeth to use your own voice or you have the option with Beethoven's Ninth to think about commentary and variations and all that stuff. But I hope we don't forget the principle that some of this stuff has been around before. In the 40s, when I was a kid, my father used to listen to the opera from the Metropolitan Opera House, and between each act, they had a panel discussion, and some of those panelists were singers who had sung those roles. And they'd say, well, when Geely did this, he did it that way, and when she did this, they did it that way, and when Wagner staged this himself. And so there was this back and forth kind of almost Socratic method. And I remember also that when my piano teacher started teaching me, and that was in the Dark Ages, she actually had the long playing records with the dog looking into the phonograph and the RCA, Victor, and they would actually had the orchestra parts only. So if a piano student wanted to start playing against the orchestra part, they also had the orchestra part only on piano roll. So you could have one piano playing the orchestra part, and you're on the other piano playing the pianist part. So these concepts, these principles about this type of integration went back, and Susan Langer mentions these in Symbolic Logic and in her Philosophy in a New Key. And if you go back even further, you look at Impressionism, look how the music influenced the poetry, influenced the painting. You have all that integration in these different types of media, and they all interacted to create this pedagogy for that whole period. And you could even bring it back as far as the Socratic method.
Yeah,
so
absolutely.
Under the principles.
There are lots of themes that continue on, and they're ebb and flow. It's unfortunate that we lose so much of what we know about teaching and learning as we move from one point to another.
Exactly.
Are there other comments? You know, Bob would give us another lecture. We'd give us 3 or 4 hours. So it's cold outside.
But we lose what we know about teaching and learning.
There we go.
Thanks.
Other comments?
I'd just like to express appreciation for being taken down that memory trip, which was very fun, remembering all that stuff that I was part of and saw happen over the course of my career, which is not over yet. But so I want to express appreciation for that. It was really wonderful to do that. The other thing that really struck me strongly, kind of as you were going through the Voyager stuff, and there was a huge burst of creativity there, and amazing things were created. And I don't think I've seen things that are like that since then. And I'm not sure why. I'd be interested to hear your thoughts of why that is. And I think maybe it has something to do with how the tools affect what people create. And, you know, HyperCard was unique in its simplicity and its flexibility.
Yeah, I think.
And now here's Jim Bierman for his thoughts.
I think it is a little bit of that build it and they will come mentality. That we had, all of a sudden we had these fantastic toys to play with, and it brings out the playfulness in people. And they came from all over the place. Laurie Anderson did the Puppet Motel, for example. And I think, you know, she's just the epitome of a creative artist with who loves to play with technology. And there were wonderful little things in there. And I found this all the way through. And the Voyager did one on the Beat Generation, and you get to see films and artwork and poetry and attend events and all that sort of stuff. You can even go through a San Francisco Flophouse from the 1950s. But at the point where you pick up that syringe that's been left by the bed in the Flophouse, it takes you out of the program. It just kills the whole thing and you're out. And you know, I mean, this is a marvelous example of the playfulness that was that came out, and a lot has to do with the tools. I see somebody here raising their iPhone. And
well, yeah, I was just saying, you know, when he was saying,
yeah.
I'm not sure if I'm seeing the creativity, and I'm looking at things, you know, full bore. You know, things happening like this right now are bringing so much to the table.
So,
I've got, you know, for $1.99, I bought a synthesizer program that gives me about 12 different synthesizers.
Yeah, and they've already surpassed 10,000 titles for the iPhone. It shows it's very much like this is Apple's version of the academic courseware exchange now online. So it's that much bigger. But there's again that explosion that comes from one technology. So one final note on this, and that is that Apple and Adobe are having a bit of a tussle over the inclusion of Flash on the iPhone. Flash delivers all this terrific interactive media that we get at the New York Times website and various other ones. And assuming that there's no resolution to this, Flash is going to be endangered. And you think again of this huge amount of stuff that's now available that could very well be cycled out of existence in no time whatsoever. Sorry it takes so long.
So let's go to Russ Bowden here. Russ?
Well, I was just reflecting on, we've gone from the era of guided instruction, where we sort of took students down paths, gave them some level of branching out, to the total hyperlinked world, where, and I remember my early days drifting off subject so many times because there was a link that took me to a link and all of a sudden I was somewhere else. And I wonder if that's not some of the issues we're having with the children of today, who are so overloaded with information that the brain is not able to focus down a path anymore.
Actually, that's what we have with most DECI members. They can drift off to God knows where. But here's Jim to give you a little response to that.
Yeah, I do want to respond to that. When I did the exposition of the poetics, I discovered very soon that, first of all, the poetics were never really written down in Aristotle's time. They were by his students. But he begins with a definition of tragedy. And almost every term in that definition is alive. And in the subsequent chapters, there you get an exposition of that. So Aristotle was really the first hypertextual thinker, and I think that effectively there is a long tradition of this, and it's just that we hadn't previously had a kind of media that took advantage of it.
Jim, remember Umberto Eco says exactly what you said in The Name of the Rose about Aristotle.
Oh, yeah, that's right. It is, yeah,
Because the manuscript supposedly was in the library about comedy.
That's it. That's right. I mean, the
because
poetics
talks
is about
that.
tragedy, and The Name of the Rose there. I went to the conference of the International Theater Institute and gave a presentation. It was very, very early in the hypercard days, and Apple showed up there to interview me for their own local in the in-house paper, and it turned out that a little article that said if Aristotle were alive today, he'd be using hypercard, says Professor Bierman.
Well, you can see how my life is enriched and all the wonderful things that I get to interact with great people like Jim Bierman at UC Santa Cruz. And I think we've accomplished what we set out to do here, which was challenge you and really make you think about these huge issues before us. Because in this digital age, we're creating massive amounts of great content, absolutely massive amounts of great content. The whole Gutenberg revolution is just, that's analog and we're digital. It's a whole great acceleration. So we really want you to think about these things. We have some more comments, and then JP.
You are doing so well that
Okay.
I'm not worried. How's that?
I just wanted to thank
It's a free lunch here.
I just wanted to thank you so much for your examples. You touched on two of the dilemmas that I brought to this conference. I mean, I'm developing a hybrid course, and I'm thinking, do I really want to spend the time to code interaction that I used to be able to do many years ago in HyperCard, spend all that time doing it in AS3, which I can do. And then I'm wondering, of course, the delivery tool of the future is going to be the iPhone. And indeed, if Apple and Adobe don't ever get together, then all this content is going to be lost. So you really hit on some really key things, and your examples are wonderful. Thank you so much.
Well, we thrive and survive with the pleasure of the entertainment industry. And, you know, we benefit from that. But, you know, when they drop those 8-track tapes, I never had one of those, but when they dropped that, there were a lot of people who were very disappointed. JP, you have a comment?
How did you collaborate? How did your collaboration begin, including Paul Saettler? Give us a little history about who you are, because you, obviously both of you are very interesting people, and I'd love to hear about how this began.
You know, the CIA has asked us similar questions. and in those situations, even though with the hot lights, I don't know. In terms of my relationship at Santa Cruz with Jim Bierman, when I first arrived on campus, I was trying to seek out those faculty champions, and those people were visionary and pushing it out, and those people that we could bring along with technology. And so I went out looking for those, and I found several. But when I found Jim Bierman, I realized that he was in a different century, and no matter how we as instructional technologists would run and try to keep up, we'd never keep up. So he's been really a visionary inspiration, I think, for all of us at Santa Cruz. You know, I come to this from a background of instructional technology. Jim comes out of the theater program, but we just both have a passion for figuring out how we can make it better for students, how we can increase the learning. So that's where I'm coming from. Jim Bierman frequently has to pre-test our equipment. So Jim and I went to lunch. He said, I'm doing this big production. I've got to have some high-end projectors, you know, blah, blah, blah. Now, UC Santa Cruz thrives and is driven by recharge. So this would have been a big, huge recharge for a month or so or whatever, you know. And so you do, CIA's not deals under the table? So you do deals under the table. And we knew that we had some equipment that was going to be planned to go in a building. The building wasn't ready. The high-end projectors for large lecture halls were sitting around in boxes waiting to be installed. The installation project was nicely timed, long enough so Jim could use them for his plays, do a little product testing, shake it out, make sure it works before they got installed in the lecture hall. So we do deals and stuff. So one other thing. Long ago, far away, I took a tour of San Diego State University, and they had a wonderful legacy now software product there called the Video Encyclopedia of the 20th Century. It was a Laserdisc product, and when you guys discard that out of your collection, send it my way. I'd love to have that. And as you know, I get great collectible stuff around the system as I try to pull things. But if you ever want to get rid of that Laserdisc collection, I've got a home for it. That was, again, incredible content. I don't know if anybody remember that. The video was the... Video Encyclopedia of the 21st century, 20th century, Time Life. It was 10 grand, as I recall, purchase price. But there's legacy, incredible content that somehow we really don't need, we don't know what to do with now. You know, because you're thinking, oh, we'll shift all those VHS titles over to the library. Well, when those Laserdiscs fall off the truck, let me know, I'll come and get it. You've been a great audience. We've taken a lot of time here, but I think we really challenged and engaged you, and we really appreciate that. So JP, and again, Jim, thank you very much.